Anna, she's over there. If you have any questions on how to turn on closed captioning, you're having issues with audio or visual, that's my homegirl to go to. Please reach out to her directly. Um, yeah, and if you need to turn up, she's also the person to see too. Yeah. So I'd like to introduce Honor the Earth and Decolonize You. We're excited, Honor, that you're joining us today. Our vision is creating a world where Indigenous sovereignty is recognized, respected, and upheld. We envision a future where communities thrive with honor, abundance, and in right relationship with Mother Earth. Our mission is a commitment to protecting the lifeways and sovereignty of our Indigenous relatives across Mother Earth. We do this by investing in our communities and a new generation of organizers through campaigns, research, training, reclaiming our narrative, and providing capacity support in service of all land and life. Decolonize You is a knowledge sharing platform to provide skills and learning in the fight for climate justice and the protection of Mother Earth. We know that Indigenous peoples hold the solutions to climate change, so Decolonize You is a platform to weave those solutions together, bring them to our communities, and organize for our collective liberation. We envision a place where education is a weapon in our fight for Indigenous sovereignty. To that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Dove Korn. Dove uses legal strategy and movement building to safeguard Indigenous sovereignty and environmental justice at the Sacred Defense Fund. Dove manages the civil rights caseload and policy campaigns resisting the destruction of Indigenous homelands and sacred sites by extractive industry. His work involves federal Indian law cases heard before the Supreme Court and proceedings on behalf of cultural practitioners, water protectors, and incarcerated elders. Dove supports Kanaka Maoli, Native Hawaiian food justice, and community health programs as a board member of Hui Ho Le Maluo. He holds a BA in government from Dartmouth College and a JD from the New York University School of Law, where he was a member of the American Indian Sovereignty Project. Dove is admitted to practice law in New Mexico. Please help me welcome Dove. Take it away.
Thanks, Wendy. Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. I know it's like goes without saying that we're in extra difficult times, but I kind of guess that we're also sharing the perspective that things have been difficult for a long time and that none of this really comes as a surprise in the imperial reality we have here called America with three Ks. So I'm just going to present on, I'm not an immigration attorney, but I practice a lot of civil rights law and work very closely with these types of issues. And, I'm not going to be sharing anything that isn't accessible online, isn't already out there from, other resources, other organizations. And I'm also not endorsing the law. I don't think that it should be clear, at least from my end, that I don't agree with this. I think this is a travesty, this reality that we're kind of stuck in right now. But I think at the same time, what's most important is that we are able to protect ourselves, our lives, our health, our bodies, our spirits from further government intrusion and abuse. And some of that, requires knowing what the law is and knowing when the law is being broken in front of you. So the hope over the next hour or so is just to outline basic principles, suggestions, and legal boundaries for when you interact with law enforcement, specifically within the 100-mile border zone, but also, at airports, ports of entry, places like that. This is geared for citizens of the US just because it becomes a different conversation clearly when you're not a citizen, but there are definitely points that are relevant to everybody, regardless of your legal status or relationship with this empire that we're in. So I think, I don't know where the PowerPoint went. I'm going to leave it to Wendy to go through it. Cool. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Wendy. I don't need to say much more about myself, but I work for Sacred Defense Fund, and its initiative, the Lakota People's Law Project, which speaks for itself a little bit. But we work around land defense, tribal sovereignty, religious freedom, and sacred sites protection. But right now, we're taking on a lot of issues revolving around police brutality, some immigration issues. It's just that time of the century, it feels like. You go to the next slide. So this is really important. Other countries, you see this with the Israeli occupation of Palestine, but and you've seen this, in Europe in the Cold War. But what countries do in times of unrest or civil concern is establish these parameters for where they can step over people's traditional civil rights and apply basically military rule. And in this case, the military rule we're living under, I mean, if you live on a reservation, you're Atlantic Oceans, any of the Great Lakes, you are living in this 100-mile border zone, which now brings with it a different set of rights, restrictions, freedoms. Almost 2/3 of Americans of the U.S. population lives within this 100-mile border zone, and it encompasses most of the U.S.'s largest cities from east to west, north to south: L.A., New York, Philly, Chicago, Houston. So it's really important to know that the situation is different within this zone because it likely affects most of us. There's a map that can just kind of show you roughly, but if you see a city with a dot in that lighter orange zone, that's a city that's within this 100-mile border zone, and you can see it's a lot of big cities. It's not a coincidence. If 2/3 of the U.S. population lived within 600 miles of the border zone, they probably make it 600 miles. So 100 miles is arbitrary, it feels like, but it actually is a very strategic attempt at control, population control, mind control, coercion, and it's just good to be aware of. Good question. Why know your rights? And I think the next slide answers them pretty clearly. See, so you can invoke your rights. Wendy, I think we lost the slides. So you can invoke your rights, exactly. Again, we have to accept, unfortunately, that we're watching the law break down around us, and so even protections and civil liberties that are guaranteed to us under the Constitution, whatever we all think about the Constitution and American law, we can't trust necessarily that when we invoke our rights, they're going to be respected. But the hope is that even if you invoke your rights and they're violated yet again, that you preserve a record for a judge to hear a case. And obviously, we don't want to get to that point, but there's no way your rights are going to be respected if you don't try to invoke them. Cool little bananagrams little situation. So this is an important principle. I think I've shared this before when we all met last year, but there's a grounding principle, and I think there might be some attorneys in here that might know this rule, but in European Christian legal systems, just your existence is, even if you're a child, but specifically if you're an adult over 18, your existence is enough to consent to jurisdiction under the American legal system. So whether you're a citizen or not, whether you're whether you're employed or not, whether you're in school or not, you need to know what the law is. And even though most people, including myself, don't know what the law is on everything, the classic example is if you get pulled over for speeding and you tell the police officer that you didn't know it was a 55, you thought it was a 70, and you're being honest about that, still the cop will say to you, well, sorry, it's your ignorance of the rule doesn't change the outcome. So it's important to know what the law is, because it's not knowing it is not going to be an excuse if you're brought to court or if you're detained or arrested by law enforcement. And I call them lawless enforcement, but for the sake of our conversation, we'll just call them law enforcement. So specifically relevant to the border zone are the agencies that operate under the Department of Homeland Security. Homeland Security is pretty much an extension of the military at this point. I'm not really going to engage much with like state law enforcement. We're going to speak most about federal officers and agents because they're the ones tasked right now with carrying out a lot of this terrorism against our families and relatives and people. And within DHS are several units, but most relevant here are four. One is CBP, Customs and Border Protection, who you likely encounter when you go through a border, whether you fly into the international terminal of an airport, whether you are driving across the Canadian or Mexican border. The second is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, which we all know about. ICE is tasked with what the name of the agency says it's tasked with. But we know really what they're useful for now is causing chaos, division, uneasiness, and fear amongst our people. And they operate under the color of law, but typically operate without any regard for law. Another agency is the Homeland Security Investigations, who you will see often in the roundups that ICE is conducting in our neighborhoods. They're adjacent to ICE, but they have a slightly more appointed task of dealing with criminal related immigration issues, meaning immigration violations. And the fourth is the TSA. We all know the TSA. The TSA is of these four entities the least equipped and the least powerful, but they also have they're narcs. Like their job is to screen you going through security. And if they don't like something, they can report you to customs. They can report you to ICE or another agency under Homeland Security. Even though the people that work for TSA don't themselves have much law enforcement power, they are still agents of the law, and yeah, will act that way when push comes to shove. Yes, we can go to the next slide. So this is a new rule. I tried to really leave out a lot of complicated legal citations or quotes from statutes because sometimes they just get too confusing. But recent federal law allows Department of Homeland Security agents to stop or board cars, buses, trucks, anything, to search for people, citizens, or specifically not citizens, who lack immigration documents or proof. And then the quote is within a reasonable distance from any external boundary of the United States. And so the law itself doesn't define what a reasonable distance is, but it's been interpreted by courts and by regulatory agencies to mean 100 air miles from a border. So 100 air miles, as we said earlier, is a pretty big swath of the continent and covers most of our largest cities in this country. But we might think of it as an unreasonable distance, but it's too late. This is what they call a reasonable distance. It's 100 miles. It almost feels arbitrary. It's almost like when you're a kid and you don't know there's other numbers. Like you're taught to count to 100 and then you kind of stop. I don't know why they didn't choose 107 miles. They chose 100. So, okay, we can go to the next one. This is basically what I said. It's what it is. It's just a poorly veiled excuse for increasing military control over our people. This is a tactic of coercion and fear, and yeah, it predates the Trump administration. So we do need to accept that. Yeah, this administration is particularly evil towards our people and our communities. But we all know deportations, ICE, their reign of violence predates the current administration and thrived under the Biden and Obama administrations. And it's not necessarily a political, it's not restrained to one political party, these types of policies and actions. So within the 100-mile zone are several types of interactions or places of interaction that are important and have their differences. Your rights depend somewhat on where this is occurring, where an interaction with law enforcement is occurring. So we'll go through these, but the first is private property. There's a difference between your own residence and then the lands of your residence. So your dwelling is different from your lawn if you have one. And then there's also a difference between businesses and residences. We'll get into this a bit later on, but private property, there are under law and current regulatory perspectives, there are differences between there can exist public areas on private property, especially with businesses, factories, farms, places like that. A second area is in the car when you're going through border security, right? If you're going through a physical border, like the US-Mexico border, or going through, obviously these borders don't exist in our hearts and minds, but they do exist in the eyes of the feds. So when you go drive through the Canadian border or the Mexican border, the interaction you have with Border Patrol in your car is going to look a certain way, and it's going to come with its own restrictions. A third area are checkpoints. These are not necessarily at the border, but they're checkpoints set up within the 100-mile zone, not at a border, where border police, ICE, different DHS, Homeland Security agencies are there to interact with you and stop you and give you trouble. I've been through some of these, especially in southern Arizona, where there's basically like a security parameter north of the border where they still check for cars, ask you for identification. These are different than border crossings. They are different altogether. Again, in the car can occur at a checkpoint, it can occur at a border crossing, but these are still all different experiences. The fifth is airports. As I said earlier, TSA has pretty exclusive reign over travel, at least domestic travel, but so does Customs and Border Enforcement. They have the power to enforce the law if you're traveling internationally or returning internationally. So that's a fifth area where you could interact with law enforcement, whether or not you're in the 100-mile border zone. Technically, a airport is a port of entry and exit, so the law changes there too. Even if it's not within the 100-mile zone, it basically is. So this is generally true. You do not need to carry a proof of citizenship when within the US at all, except obviously when you're crossing a border. So if you get pulled over at a checkpoint, in southern Arizona or California or New Mexico or Texas, that isn't a border crossing, it's just a checkpoint, you don't need a passport. I mean, if you're driving the car, you need a driver's license because that's to operate a motor vehicle. But if you're the passenger in the car, you don't need proof of anything. And if they ask you for proof of citizenship, you can refuse. And so I think this creates a space for active resistance. They have to, if they ask you, are you a citizen? And you say yes, and they say, well, I need a passport. All you need to tell them is, I don't need to provide proof of citizenship, and I won't be providing proof of citizenship. And refusing to provide proof of citizenship is not legal grounds for, at least at checkpoints and non-border crossings, it's not grounds for the agent to detain or arrest or continue to give you trouble. So that's just something to remember. So, if you're even flying out of a regional airport domestically, you don't need proof of citizenship. You just need a valid form of ID, but it doesn't need to prove that you're a US citizen. Obviously, we are US citizens, but I think we're at an age where we have to step up and make it difficult for these entities to harass us and control us. And I think this is one place where you can do that pretty safely. I've done it before. I mean, I'm a white person, so it looks different, but still, I think we all have a role to play, especially if you are in a more secure position than other people. I see a question. I'm not sure if I should respond. No, I mean, Ashley, you're right. Like you can't rely on legality. I think a lot of this is using your best judgment, and I think prioritizing your safety and compliance. I think there's a prideful element of compliance where we don't want to comply because it's like putting our tail between our legs or something. But I think compliance sometimes is the best decision if you don't want to become more, you don't want to face more hostility and opposition and difficulty, especially if you're trying to get somewhere. So I think it's about using your discretion. And again, you don't need to have a passport on you. You don't have to, you can provide your ID. It's not the worst thing to provide your state ID. So we'll get to private property. there is a really important discrepancy here that has become a reality pretty recently, and it's this 25-mile zone within the border, within that 100-mile border zone. So law enforcement, state, federal, any law enforcement will need a warrant, or they need your consent, your verbal consent to enter private land, right? Not just your home, but private land. So that means, if you own a business, let's say you own a nursery, or you own an amusement park, or you own like a little restaurant with a big backyard or something, they to enter that land further than 25 miles from the border, law enforcement will need a warrant, no matter what, or your consent, one or the other. If you don't give them your consent and they have a warrant, then your consent is irrelevant because they have a warrant. We'll get later to what a correct warrant looks like. But when you live or own land within 25 miles of the border, and not your physical dwelling, but land, right? You have that nursery with 5 acres of trees and shrubs and flowers that you're growing. They can enter your land without a warrant, without even notifying you often, if you're within 25 miles of the border. And for their argument, the Fed's argument is that this is a way of, looking after fugitives, people that are hiding out. We may not agree with this. I don't agree with it. It's terrible, but it's very hard to argue with the 25-mile border parameter. But it is important that to know that no matter how close you are to the border, agents, federal or state, cannot enter your physical home, your residence, including a business, right? So if it's like the building of a business, it's your storefront. They need a warrant or consent to enter that building. So land is different than a physical structure. Okay, we go to the next one. So this is kind of the thing that people are most, I think, fearful of right now. It reminds a lot of us of what, at least if you had a somewhat holistic education, you learned about how the Nazis and other entities in recent history rounded up people, undesirable groups of people in their societies. And it's by these door knocks, these visits, where they show up with armed forces and basically scare the living shit out of you, and test whether you are going to comply or not. So if ICE visits your home, you have the right to remain silent. That's going to always be the case. You have this right, whether you're a citizen, whether you're undocumented, whether you have a green card, you have the right to remain silent. That is a Fifth Amendment right that protects anyone living within the United States. You don't have to be a citizen. A second thing to do is you remain calm. You don't run away. Not that running away can be used by ICE as grounds for retaliation. In theory, it shouldn't, but obviously it looks different when you panic. The goal here is to not let them inside. No matter what happens, is to not let them inside. And part of that includes remaining, breathing, counting your breath, maybe for 20 seconds. You don't have to respond right away. You can keep the door cracked. You can close it on them. But you just don't want to give you don't want to flee. Fleeing invites trouble. You have the right to demand a warrant signed by a federal judge before you let ICE into your home. So ICE cannot enter your home again without consent, your own consent, or without a judicial warrant. We'll get to this in a bit, but the warrants that they try to present are almost always not judicial warrants. So they're not signed by a federal judge. They could be signed by an administrative judge. That doesn't count. They can be signed by an ICE officer. That doesn't count. It could be signed by Trump himself. That doesn't count. It has to be signed by a federal judge. And that's probably the most technical thing you'll have to look for if you're presented with papers, if ICE shows up to your door. But I'll show an example later of what the right papers look like. Again, the right to remain silent goes hand in hand with your right to speak with an attorney. This is whether or not you are detained or arrested. Obviously, if nothing happens, that right to speak with a lawyer is there, but it's not as important. However, if they detain you, they threaten to come back, or they just arrest you, you have every right to speak with an attorney, and you shouldn't sign or agree to anything before you do so. I think fifth, this is, I guess it's an option for us, but you have a right to exercise your First Amendment privilege to record and obtain information. You know, if you're watching agents harass and threaten and scare people, you have every right to record them. And obviously, we've so much of the footage we're seeing on social media is coming from these our brave relatives who are willing to put a camera in the face of these evildoers, right? And share that information, sometimes against, you know, it's their own personal security and well-being that they're jeopardizing. But, you know, without people exercising these rights, we wouldn't have as clear of a picture of what's going on right now. Again, you just don't want to interfere with the arrest. So if they are arresting somebody, physically getting involved with that isn't going to help you, and it's not going to help the person they're arresting. But you can record the arrest, and you have every right to. You can go to the next slide. So this is just a short video, and I think it just summarizes what we've been talking about, but we'll play it and we'll move on afterwards. I don't know if anybody can hear, but Wendy.
Apartment. I stands for. It was 5:30 a.m. when ICE came to Esther's apartment. ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The agents lied to Esther, saying they were police officers investigating a crime, and her husband, Alexei, was a potential witness. Is Alexei home? They asked innocently. Now, Esther's gut told her she should cooperate, but she remembered something she'd heard on the radio. ICE had been making early morning sweeps using tricks like this to get people to open their doors. Esther remembered she had rights. ICE may try similar tricks at your home. They may say they're looking for a friend, relative, or roommate, but do not be fooled and do not open the door. Instead, remain calm and be polite. Tell the agents that you'd like to see a warrant and their ID. Ask them to slip these documents under the door or hold them up to the peephole. Without a warrant signed by a judge, ICE is not allowed to enter or search your home. ICE usually won't have a warrant, but they may lie and say they do or show you something else that looks official. So look carefully and take pictures of whatever they show you. If they refuse to share any of these documents, then ask them for their card and contact information. Do not show the agents anything or say anything except, I do not consent for you to enter my home. I do not want to talk to you without a lawyer present. Please leave. Now, ICE won't always listen to you and may enter your home using force. But saying these things might help you in court, even if the agents don't listen.
Yeah, so that kind of reiterates what I shared, but you know, they're using these early morning door knocks to basically catch people when they're most vulnerable, right? Like we all know what it's like to wake up in the morning. Sometimes you don't want to get out of bed, and you're not thinking clearly. You haven't washed your face, you haven't brushed your teeth, you haven't drank any water, and they prey on people in those moments because it's a great time to scare the shit out of people. And again, I think a useful tool here is the moment you are confronted, you know, if someone does show up to your door, law enforcement of any kind, I think it's good to at least record with, you know, your phone audio or just your video, what's happening, so you can get on record what you've said. A lot of these people are not going to have body cameras. There's no obligation in their mind to uh, capture what's going on. They are, again, operating without any procedure. So you can go to the next one. Okay, I think, is that the next one? Yeah, it is. So in the car, it creates a separate experience with law enforcement because now you have a private property that is mobile, and you know, cops, we've all probably been pulled over. Most of us been pulled over before, and cops use it as an opportunity to get more information. You know, you could have been going 3 over the speed limit, but they're really looking to see if you have a joint in the car, if you have an open bottle of wine, if you know your seatbelt's unbuckled, whatever. They're looking. It's a pretext for other things. So you know, within the 100-mile border zone, these are being spotted, but there are these roving patrols where you basically have cops, a couple of cop cars, DHS, CBP, ICE vehicles, usually marked, but not always marked cars that are patrolling these areas and pulling people over for, whatever it is. They have to do so under what they call reasonable suspicion, which is a super loaded concept. Obviously, we know reasonable suspicion is usually racially motivated. It's usually driven by they catch a glimpse of who's driving. They maybe run the license plate. They see a name attached to the license plate that is, in their minds, can't be a white name, and they pull you over for that. But still, like with everything else, keeping record of what's happening is going to be really important if you end up in this type of situation. So, these agents will use reasonable suspicion to pull people over. There has to be not just reasonable suspicion of a person, but an actual crime or violation. And to do that is tricky, because once you're pulled over, it creates like a domino effect of stress and uncertainty. But if the agent is not able to explain to the driver, specifically the driver, why they're stopping you, then they have no grounds for the stop. And that's really important to keep track of, because often, as I said, they pull people over because they look a certain way. It's not because there's actually any, I have friends in from a bunch of reses in southern Arizona and New Mexico who look like they're relatives on the other side of the border, but they're citizens, and they get harassed by state and federal police just because they are seen driving their car through a 30-mile speed zone. Cops get a look at you and they make a decision, but it's illegal, full stop, for any federal or state agent to use race or ethnicity as a justification for a stop. We should go to the next one. Yeah. So checkpoints, usually you can walk through checkpoints. I have some friends over there who in southern Arizona who just will walk, they'll walk from their house to the store, and they'll have to walk through a checkpoint. But usually if you're going through a checkpoint, you're driving a car, or in a car or a truck or a bus. And Border Patrol is allowed to stop vehicles at checkpoints. They can ask limited questions about your citizenship, whoever's in the car. They can visually inspect the exterior of a vehicle, but they are not allowed to conduct a physical inspection of the inside of the vehicle without a warrant. So they might look into your car. They might try to get information. But at the end of the day, these people, these Border Patrol officers, they're tasked not with stopping cannabis from moving across state borders. They're tasked with overseeing immigration-related issues. And so, in theory, they're not looking for cannabis. They're looking for other things. But no matter what, they're not allowed to search your car. And they cannot, go through your vehicle and take, open the glove compartment and check pockets. They have no right to do that without a warrant. They might, especially if you raise flags, I've been in this position, they'll bring you to a secondary area and question you further and again do an inspection, but they yet again cannot enter your car or your truck or your bus and poke around. Agents are also not allowed to ask questions that are not about citizenship or hold you for some undefined period of time, but they might try. And if you are to know that they're not allowed to ask those types of questions unrelated to citizenship, you can tell them that. Again, if you have nothing to hide, maybe it's best not to poke the bear further. But I think it's about using your discretion and your judgment in the moment. And sometimes these people they're doing their terrible job, but they're friendly about it. Other times they're doing their terrible job and they're also being hostile. And I wouldn't want to provoke someone who's already being hostile. Again, the last thing here is you do always have the right to remain silent, but you don't have to, which includes answering whether you're a citizen or not. But if you refuse to answer basic questions like that, they will detain you, and then you might run into trouble. They might ask for fingerprints. They might start trying to get photos of you. So if you're a citizen, might as well just say you are. It's not. I don't think it really is worth the cost of resistance all the time to just be difficult. Go to the next one. Yeah, so I just kind of said this, but this applies when you're in a car at a border crossing or at a checkpoint. They cannot search the interior of the vehicle without your consent. They'll use this term probable cause, but again, that probable cause is going to have to be based on something that isn't, oh, you're brown, and I got to check the car because of that. It has to be, there's proof. They've run your name. They see that you might not be legal. Another incident that happens a lot is they smell drugs, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. That's not usually what they're looking for. I mean, at a border crossing, yes, but I think the simplest move is just to not travel with drugs across international borders as like a general rule. Sad that we can't, but it's the rule. Oh, and the last point there was just to, as with everything else, just report, keep track. If there's 2 or 3 of you in the car, somebody should be recording the interaction. If you're concerned it's going to escalate, that can be written recording, audio recording, visual recording, but it's really good to have a memory of what happened. So if anything does go wrong, you have that for the future. These are kind of repetitive, but still worth going through. Again, agents are allowed to question passersby about their citizenship and what they're bringing into the country. If you're going through the Mexican or the Mexican border or the Canadian-US border, you again have the right to remain silent, and you don't have to answer questions to establish your citizenship, but you probably should. Otherwise, you're likely to be denied entry, or you might end up sitting there for hours. So I think usually it's useful. I mean, if they start asking you what do you do for work and who your friends are, and they can't ask those questions, but they can ask you, are you a citizen? And that's probably a question worth answering if you are a citizen. This is the one exception to the inside search where border patrol, not checkpoints, but literally at the physical international border, they can search your vehicle. If you've ever crossed a border, they do this. They do it sometimes with like a bomb detection device. Sometimes they'll bring dogs up to the car. They don't need a warrant in this case, but they do need a warrant in any other case. You need a warrant at a checkpoint. They need a warrant at your physical home or business. But if you're going to pass through an international border, your act of passing through the border is consenting to their invasion of privacy. It's just like when you go through TSA. If you don't comply, they'll pat you down, things like that. So again, like they will use probable cause or reasonable suspicion as like blanket justifications for invading your privacy. But I think the simplest way to handle this is to just minimize your suspicion, and its compliance is to an extent the way to save yourself stress and bodily threat is to just say, yeah, I'm a citizen, was traveling to see friends, or I was traveling for vacation. You don't have to be honest with these people. You can just say, yeah, I was just traveling to go on a hike on the southern side of the border, even if you've never hiked in your life. Like, there are ways to give them minimal information. Every single time I've had trouble at a border, it's because I was traveling with somebody who thought it was wise to share too much. And I don't spend my time with people that are compliant. So it's going to usually create trouble for me too. So this is kind of a hot topic. I know there's a lot of words, but we got to get through them just to get to the scenarios at the end. But when we go through an airport, it's pretty advised to turn your phone off. If you have the luxury, of having a job that gets you a second phone, or you have the luxury of owning an old phone, maybe travel with that and keep the active phone that you really use off, maybe in the bottom of your bag. But a burner phone can be a really good solution to, if they ask to see your phone, you just give them the phone that is your burner phone. TSA is unlikely to ever request your password, but if they do, you don't need to provide it. You don't need to provide a password. You don't need to unlock the phone. They might confiscate your device. Still unlikely to happen, but if they do, make sure you know who's doing that, their agency and badge number, etc. And I think most important, which is what we're seeing now, I just went through security yesterday, but you can opt out of biometric facial recognition. Wendy and I were talking earlier about the Palantir situation right now, and how our private information and data is being stored. But opting out is smart because they can't keep a record of you the same way, and you have every right to opt out. And they might push you through additional screening, but they cannot force you to opt in. I've had trouble recently where I've wanted to opt out, but I was late for a flight and I didn't really have a choice, or I was going to miss the flight. So I think a way to deal with that is just to not be, don't get there last minute if you want to opt out. They expect, like, I travel out of a small airport in northern New Mexico, and there I can get there pretty last minute and catch my flight. But if I want to opt out, I have to be there earlier so I can, anticipate extra time spent. This is important, but I don't need to review much of it. But CBP they have their own code of conduct. Obviously, they don't really seem to respect it, but they have to, show in court if they violate their own code of conduct, why they did so. They're not allowed to use excessive force. They can't strip search or repeatedly detain you unless they have this reasonable suspicion, and they are not allowed to damage your personal property. I've met people who have faced that, where it's almost like retaliation for your difficulty, but it's still, proof. If they destroy your phone or your computer or something in the process of going through security, that's they're not allowed to. It's called an unlawful taking, and it requires just compensation usually. So this is what I kind of said earlier, but this 100-mile border zone, even though it's an attempt to water down our civil and constitutional rights, you still have constitutional rights within the zone. The Fourth Amendment, which protects against arbitrary searches and seizures of your person or your property. Here, I think it was Cheryl who asked me about probable cause and reasonable suspicion. These are two different standards that govern police conduct and decision making. Probable cause is a higher standard, but reasonable suspicion is basically the excuse that officers, agents use to question you, hold you up, detain you. Basically, if they smell drugs, or they see a pipe, or they see maybe scratch marks or modification to your gas tank area on your car. Things like that. They see something on your waistband that looks strange. Probable cause is a higher legal standard, and it's again, these things are really loose, unfortunately, but there needs to be a set of credible facts that a crime is being committed. It's not just like a vibe, right? There needs to be evidence, right? There's blood stains, there's a bag of drugs on the ground. Like, there needs to be something very clear, not just suggested. But again, like, it is an illusion. Law is a smokescreen for power. We're kind of stuck in that hellscape right now. But we do need to believe that the Constitution, which all these old white guys wrote, protects us all, even though we know it doesn't. In theory, it's supposed to. And if you end up in front of a judge who's supposed to uphold the law, they're in theory supposed to uphold your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights, whether you're within this 100-mile zone or not. The Fifth Amendment, by the way, is mainly about your right to not self-incriminate. So you have the right to remain silent, you have the right to an attorney, you have the right to, both, if you're we've all probably seen the testimony from Congress where you have these like criminals saying, I don't, these like criminal corporate leaders that are saying like, oh, I exercise my Fifth Amendment right, they're not going to say anything. Same thing applies in a stop, same thing applies going through security. So just keep that in mind. Do I have to answer law enforcement questions? I think I'm driving this point home just because it's important, but pretty much, when you can go to the next one, pretty much no. You have the right to remain silent and say nothing, again, except if you're being asked about your citizenship status, going through a border or a checkpoint. You don't have to give over any information. And silence is silence is very difficult. I think it's an act of meditation and resistance to remain silent, because we, get confronted with these people, and honestly, your blood starts to boil, and I mean, I've been in these situations, and like, I got to keep my cool. Like, my instinct is I just want to punch these people or yell at them or something, but I know that it's not going to help me. It's not going to help my family. It won't help my friends. And so pretty much, you want to keep quiet. Like, I use the example of, like, if you someone with road rage kind of thinks you cut them off, or wasn't, they just in their mind think you did the wrong thing in the road, and they kind of come up to you and they roll their window down and they start swearing at you and throwing the middle finger at you. Like, the thing that those people hate the most is you not responding to them. The moment you respond to them, they have more to work with. But if you just go silent, it's like silent treatment. I think silent treatment is a powerful weapon, when we're faced with this barrage of invasion and violence. So these are general facts. Federal agents, state agents. Once you request to speak with a lawyer, don't say anything else. Cops know that this is the procedure, so they can't act like they don't know that this is your right. Even after you state your right to remain silent and your right to an attorney, anything you say after that can still be taken as a waiver of your right to remain silent. So it's like, maybe practice being silent. Like, call up a friend, tell them to say the most annoying things at you, and just ignore them for 5 minutes and see if you can do that. It might make good practice. It also might be really weird, but it's I think ultimately can save you a lot of stress and difficulty, if you practice remaining silent. Again, only a judge can order you to answer questions under oath. So a cop makes you answer, "Oh, who was here last night?" or "Who's in the back bedroom?" Like, you don't got to answer any of that. The only thing you do need to answer, and this is true in about half the states, is your name. So if they ask your name, you don't have to provide ID, but you do need to provide a name. I think this brings up the question of whether you give them a real name or not. It's a difficult thing. I think this is where people with very generic names are going to benefit, like if you're John Smith or Jane Doe or whatever. But I think most of us here are, don't have typical names, so it's going to be hard to keep your identity secure if they ask you for this. I think the next slide has the list of states. Yes, here. This just is the highlights what we've been talking about, but the main goal is you want to end your law enforcement interaction as soon as possible. You want to state these sayings out loud, right? I'm going to remain silent, and I want to speak to a lawyer. But again, these 23 states, if you see them there, Alabama, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Missouri, Nevada, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Mexico, North Dakota, Ohio, Rhode Island, Utah, Vermont, and Wisconsin. As of now, those 23 states require you to answer with your name. If you're outside of those 23 states, lucky you. This is again a reiteration, but an agent, whether it's a law enforcement agent from ICE or the state, comes to your door, never invite them in your home. Just keep the door closed. Say, "I'll be right there." Talk to them through the door if you can. Preferably, if you have one of those chain locks, I don't know what they're called, but you can keep that locked and open the door crack and talk to them. But you don't owe them anything. If they have a warrant, it's going to look a little different. Again, these are all kind of repetitive, but again, I'm trying to drive it home. So step outside if you can. Don't let them inside. Don't let them check out your home. Say your lawyer, whether or not you have a lawyer, will contact the law enforcement agents on your behalf and get their information. That these cops hate being asked their badge number. It's like the last thing they want, because if they mess up, now you have a way of tracking them. So yeah, this is crucial. Warrants, very important. To enter your private home or the private areas of a business. So if you have that nursery, federal agents really don't need a warrant to walk around the grounds of your business. But if they want to enter the storefront, they want to enter the physical structure of your business, they are going to need a federal judicial court issued warrant. So there needs to be a federal judge's signature on the warrant, or your consent. They, as I said earlier, ICE agents are rarely able to get these warrants, and they'll try to trick people and show up with either no paperwork or papers that suggest warrant but are not a warrant. And that's because they know and expect that people are clueless. But I think as we get more aware, and quote unquote woke to their bullshit, we are learning how to defend ourselves with silence. We're learning how to defend ourselves with compliance. You're learning how to defend yourself with the law that they're supposed to be enforcing. You actually end up becoming the enforcer. So, if you see, I'll show the next slide like a couple different forms, but an ICE agent's signature, an ICE administrative judge's signature, or an immigration judge's signature, these are not sufficient. It has to be a federal district court judge. Occasionally be a circuit court judge, but almost always it's going to be a district court judge. Go to the next one. So you'll see these two slides or two photos. On the left is a valid warrant, as long as it's signed by the judge, and on the right is an invalid warrant. It could say warrant on it. It doesn't matter. Look for these little markers. If you see DHS at the top, as you do on the right side of the page with in the left corner of that right side, that is not a valid warrant. The Department of Homeland Security cannot issue a warrant that's valid like this. It has to be a court. It's very hard for ICE to get these warrants. So if you are presented with one, you can safely assume that it's not going to be a valid warrant. But you don't want to just, you also want to look for these types of markers. If you see U.S. District Court, probably a bad sign for you. If you see U.S. District Court and the name of a judge and their signature at the bottom, probably a bad sign for you. But just take a look at these forms. These are very different forms. They look very different. They smell different. And they, yes, technically ICE can forge a signature all they want, but you don't know for sure whether they're doing that. So it's best to look for these markers, right? U.S. District Court, judge's signature at the bottom. A search and seizure warrant is usually the language you're going to find. The other form, it's crazy. Yeah, it is crazy, Sabrina. It's like, it reminds me of like being in middle school and people were trying to like forge tests and stuff. It's like if you didn't get the format right, the professor or the teacher is going to know right away. Yeah, you can make a warrant, start rounding up the ICE agents. So yeah, I think it's just important to look for these little differences, and these slides will be shared with everybody so you can review them yourselves. Oh yeah, look for that date. You'll see on the left side there's a portion, this little a slot for the date. Keep an eye out for the date. If it's too late, if it's expired, it's not a valid warrant. So the next two slides are just about basic things to remember. If you remember anything, one is don't flee a checkpoint or any law enforcement stop. That's a bad decision. If you get stopped and it's escalating and you can't de-escalate it, try to get their name, their number, and any other information that can identify the agent. Again, whether you're detained, arrested, or not even detained or arrested, just interacting with agents, you have the right to remain silent and speak to an attorney. And you don't have to provide any information about where you were born, how you entered, or how long you've been in the US. Again, if you're passing through a border checkpoint at the border or those other checkpoints away from the border, you need to, if you're going through the border patrol checkpoint, you need to provide proof of citizenship. If you're just going through one of those regular checkpoints, you don't need to provide proof of citizenship, but you do need to answer whether you are a citizen. And definitely don't provide fake documents. That's like, you could have been doing nothing wrong and all of a sudden you're going to serve 10 years in prison. So probably best not to forge those documents. Here are things that I've also stated, but again, refusing a search doesn't give agents probable cause for a search. It's illegal, as I said, for any law enforcement officers to conduct any search or stop on the basis of what are called protected classes under constitutional law: race, national origin, religion, sex, or ethnicity. Obviously, we are living in a reality where the feds don't acknowledge the diversity of gender, the diversity of religion, the bullshit background of race itself, but these still are protected classes, and we know pretty well that the tools of these agencies start usually with racial profiling. So it's just important to remember that that's not a legal basis, and if you sense that it is the basis they're using to give you trouble, they're out of line. The last thing here is, it's not that crucial, but if you are asked, it's not your home, it's not a checkpoint, you still don't have to answer agents' questions, you don't have to provide ID, ask if you're free to go, and if you're not, they say you're not, then you are under arrest. So again, they need to provide a reason usually, but sometimes they won't. But it's a way to kind of get it's a way to kind of speed along the interaction, because sometimes they're just there to harass you and try to get information from you that you're not obligated to provide. It's not a crime to not tell ICE where your undocumented friends are staying the night. Like you have no obligation to tell them that, unless you're a narc and an asshole, but it's probably not what you are. So this is important, and I think we're approaching kind of the end here, but and then we'll get to some scenarios, but you can film, you can record interactions with the Border Patrol or ICE on your private property, in vehicle stops on the side of the road in the border zone, and at these checkpoints. But if you're crossing a border, right, the US-Mexico border, the Canadian-US border, you are not allowed to videotape or record anything. You'll usually see big signs for this as you're entering those zones, but those ports of entry are slightly more protected, and it's good to know that. The same is true, if you're going through a physical border or an airport, they don't need reasonable suspicion to search electronic devices, but they do need that suspicion to hold a device for an extended period of time, and search the device. So they'll have to state what their reasonable suspicion is. They can't just say, "Oh, you don't look like someone we trust." Like that's not a valid. But they need to say, "Well, we have reason to suspect that you've engaged in unlawful interstate commerce or human trafficking." They got to name something. They can't just say, "Oh, we don't really like you." But again, we don't know if they're gonna follow these rules. We can go to the next one. So these are just general practices I think that are good. Calm down, breathe, collect yourself before you respond. Breath works. Breathe. It really does help to make hard decisions. Again, the goal of law enforcement is generally to harass and intimidate you. Another one of their goals is to feel, they want to feel strong and sturdy, and even though they're operating from a position of instability or fragility. These are very insecure, usually men, who probably have not been hugged in a long time. And so, yeah, just remember that their job is mainly to scare the shit out of you. And if you just keep your composure and remember that you got Creator, you got your friends, you got your family on your side, and you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to hide. So don't act like you have something to hide. And silence sometimes might feel like a way to hide something, but it really is probably your strongest tactic, because silence suggests, innocence. Usually it suggests, well, what do you got? You have nothing to say. Why do you have to respond to them? Less is more. And again, discipline is an act of resistance. So beat them at their own game. If you are feeling harassed or intimidated by them, it's better not to return the volley, because then all of a sudden you're going to be facing escalation that isn't really worth your time or your well-being. We'll go to the next one. Yeah, this is pretty much obvious. Don't lie if you can. And remember, silence is probably your best tactic. So we'll watch this short video and then we'll do some scenarios, and I think we'll do some questions and answers if anyone has, but I think we can watch this video. Wendy insisted this was in there, so it had to be.
Blame it on me.
No, blame it on me. Blame it on me.
It's lovely talking to you also.
Oh, hello.
We were just talking about you kids.
I'm Denise Heberly.
And I'm Bill Goodman.
Together, we've been fighting fascism for over 50 years.
And so much has changed over those 50 years, such as the ingredients to a successful firebomb.
And the glass that bank windows are made of.
But there's one thing that hasn't changed over 50 years, something that is so important to tell you kids who are new to this movement.
Shut the fuck up. You're sitting in the police transport van after a protest?
Shut the fuck up. In a holding cell with your comrades?
Shut the fuck up. Cop knocks on your door?
Shut the fuck up.
Texting on an unsecured device?
Shut the fuck up. Pulled over by the cops after a protest?
Shut the fuck up. Cop just asking about your day?
Shut the fuck up. Feds, call your mom.
Tell your mother to shut the fuck up.
Now, repeat after me. When the cops come calling, what do you do?
It's true, and the National Lawyers Guild is when I was in law school, they were the only group of people that I trusted, and they fight very relentlessly for our civil rights, our liberties, justice. No one's perfect, but in the legal world, there are very few operations like NLG, the National Lawyers Guild. So if they're telling us to shut the fuck up, we probably should shut the fuck up. I've never been more satisfied by two old white people like these guys over here. Like, it's surprising that they get it, you know, like we're so used to people that look like that not really
Get me out of here. Awesome. Okay. Last ones.
Yeah, this is just to drive it home. Right to remain silent and your ability to speak in the presence of a lawyer, regardless of whether you're a citizen, undocumented, have a green card. Crucial to remember. Okay, we can go to the next, the last couple slides, which are scenarios. And I'm not sure, Wendy, if you want to break into groups.
Yeah. So thank you so much for that. That was amazing. We're gonna go into breakout groups. I think we do. I just want to share some things about why this training is happening at this time. This is definitely not an endorsement of the legal system at all. This settler colonial nation, like at all. That's not what this is. These legal systems are not going to save us. At the same time, I do believe in setting us up for like our best optimal success in each scenario, right? And so like arming ourselves with that. And that also has to come with a personal risk assessment. I'm not gonna get like, I'm gonna get away more with things than like say a Black woman, right? Or a trans woman. That's just where we live, right? And so I can definitely exercise my muscle a bit more as a citizen and as a person who's light skinned, my positionality. Thanks, Rafael. And do a bit more. And lastly, this has applicable like local context too, because like in LA right now, people are opening the door. Two, there's no documents being presented at all, like at all. And three, we're getting got by like Temu officer looking motherfuckers. Like people who just went on Amazon and like bought the ICE and the police and the whatever like just clowns. And so yeah, I think that there's like space to hold the complexity and the nuance of like it's different applications to like each of us, because not all of us are going to have like the same positionality. And at the same time, just making it easier for them, right, to get got, I think is super important, right? Like we can still do all the right things and still get got. But then later, should we have the chance to actually like fight it in a legal freaking court, your chances of winning, hopefully better than like zero because I went ham, right? And so there is a certain level of like nuance, complexity, and also discipline around this, right? We all don't like cops. We wish that we could do the things. No one's saying don't do that. We're just saying like within this framework, right? So I'm gonna share some a doc with y'all for breakout scenarios. There we go.
Yeah, and yeah, like as you said, Wendy, like usually the people that are coming to your door, either they're legit law enforcement or they're not, but you don't, they need a warrant to even see your apartment or your house. So I think the best thing is if you sense their ICE or whatever, you don't have to respond. If they say we have a warrant, and you're about to break down your door, you say, I need to see proof of a warrant. But I think sometimes playing dead, like you're not home, sometimes is the best move. That's why they come at 5:30, because they're like, well, this person's probably at home, but you don't have to open the door for him.
Cool. So, thanks for that, Doe. Appreciate it. So I've assigned breakout rooms. You're gonna notice a doc in the chat. If you're not for engaging, that's totally fine. This is a recorded session. You'll see it later. But I know folks had said previously like they wanted to flex that muscle in different scenarios. And so go ahead and click on that doc. We're gonna jump into breakout rooms. We'll do 10 minutes or so. And room 1, you're gonna have the first scenario. Room 2, you're gonna have the second scenario. Room 3, you'll have actually room 4, you'll have the third scenario. Hang on one sec. Some folks have hopped up, so just wanna re-break out. Thank you, Summer, appreciate you. Let's see. There we go. Have to recreate these, one sec. Okay, cool. And we'll give you folks 10, and if you wanna write down on the document, pick your own text color so you can identify, and we'll do a report back as folks come back. That would be amazing. 10 minutes or so. Here we go. Connor's probably driving.
That's where I was staying at the time. Oh, shoot. I'll tell the story later.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, the recording.
This is that kind of story. Okay. All right, we're gonna get folks back in here. So, do y'all have I guess we could either you could have a volunteer report back, or y'all could drop in the chat, whichever y'all decide to do. Just a heads up. Okay, other folks should be coming back now. Dang, y'all had the easy scenario. That's good. Straight to the point. You're like, I'm opting out. The end. The end. Nothing more to say. Drop the mic. Go to my gate. If I had long hair, I'd be like, go to my gate. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Waiting for some folks in room 1. We'll give them a little bit more time as they wrap up. Welcome back. Phew, time flew. Time flew by. Cool. Welcome back, everybody. I hope that was useful. Could we get a volunteer from, you can either drop it in the chat or have a volunteer to go to report back from team 1. Who would like to do that?
We already sorted it, can
Get
volunteer.
it, Amy.
So Anna was very helpful as someone that sadly has experience with this a lot. They were sharing, so don't get out of the vehicle ever and ask if you're being detained, if you're not, and move on your way if you know, are not. And if you are, then you can ask for a senior officer and like go up, which I thought was really good advice. We also had a question quickly that came up. This was just about border crossing in general, thinking about how they will lie to you in different scenarios. So we went to a kind of different scenario, but I've gotten detained or like sent to secondary, not detained, but sent to secondary for crossing with seeds accidentally. But they saw, they saw them, and then they were threatening to fine me if I didn't declare them. Is that true? Like, can they fine you for crossing with seeds, or did they just put you on like the cross with agriculture kind of like blacklist?
What kind of seeds were they?
They were like cilantro seeds that are hard to find.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely can. I don't know. Yeah, if you declare them, they won't. But yeah, if you don't declare them, then they can fine you. And it's very loose, like it can be $1,000.
Wow.
If if you just forget and it's not a big amount, but if it's intentional and you have like a large amount of stuff you're moving across, yeah, then it can be as high as, it can be tens of thousands of dollars if they want. It's very arbitrary. But yeah, if you don't declare it, then they can threaten you with a fine.
Okay, thank you.
Pretty nuts, right?
Yeah, totally bonds.
Mhm.
Thanks, Amy, for reporting back and for the question. Team 2, scenario B. You live in Tucson, roughly 70 miles from the border. ICE agents appear at your home seeking to detain a friend of yours who happens to be out of the house at the moment. Your friend has legal documentation. Can we get a volunteer, or if you all feel more comfortable in the chat, feel free to unmute.
Okay, I could share, and then if I miss anything, feel free to hop on, y'all.
Get
Um,
it, Paula.
Cool. So we basically said that, right, rules still apply. Not opening the door unless there is a warrant signed by a federal judge, making sure that if that's the case, the date is correct, it's signed, the name of the person that whoever they are looking for is correct. All of that good stuff. And like was mentioned, that usually isn't the case. Making sure that we alert our friend that isn't home to go somewhere, nowhere that is their regular routine. So if they're like, at a certain time they're going to the gym, at a certain time they're going here, making sure that they know not to go to those places and go somewhere where they can kind of like hide out for a few hours until the coast is clear. If they are in a zone that's closer to the border within that 25-mile radius, remembering that, ICE can be in your backyard, they can hop the fence, still cannot enter inside without a warrant signed by a federal judge, but they do have a little more leeway on the areas that they can enter, that is within, our outside homes. Am I missing anything?
You did good. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll go for it.
No, just the 25-mile, 100-mile. The only real difference there is that your land, if you're within that 25-mile zone, your land, not your dwelling like your house, but if you have land, you have external areas of your property that are accessible. It can even be a fence that they can hop over. They have a right in their mind and under the current law to scope it out. But yeah, that doesn't change the ability to ask to enter your home and stuff.
Nice. Thank you, Lala. Thank you, Dove. Scenario 3, scenario C. You're going through security at your local airport for a regional flight. The TSA agent requests you to stand before the biometric camera before allowing you to proceed through security. What can you do within your legal rights? Team 3.
No. I'm just kidding. Just saying I'd like to opt out and step aside.
There you go. Any additional to that? I'm glad you're not giving a reason, not giving, yeah. And I see your notes here, say it before you approach the camera. From experience presenting tribal ID, then passport if needed. Excellent. Anything to add there, Dove?
No, I mean, you might, as long as you can anticipate them giving you maybe a stricter search or something, but usually it's gonna be fine. And you want to just be like, a lot of these agents get it. Like I think sometimes it's not what you say to these people, it's like how you say it. And I think a lot of agents are just, I mean, a lot of these people get paid pretty little to do a pretty difficult job. And yeah, they're narcs, they're like, they're cops in a way, but a lot of them are just trying to pay their bills and support a family. And I think a lot of them agree, in their hearts that this shit is crazy. It's different than being like a cop with a gun or with with a weapon, right? Like these people, it's a stable job, it's not a sexy job. And I think just telling them, yeah, like I don't want to do that, thank you. Like they don't need to give a reason because they probably get it, like they understand the suspicion. So it's just when someone says, yeah, I'd rather be pat down, I don't want to go through that weird machine over there, like it's, yeah. But again, I think it's like good to show up a bit earlier to the airport if that's your plan, because you never know what's going to happen.
Gotcha. Cool. Way to go, everybody. That was excellent. Thank you for hanging in there. If you need to hop off, please feel free to hop off. However, I want to give ample time to anyone who might have questions specific to your positionality or just, in general. So I'll open it up. If there's nothing that you can think of or you need to hop off, please feel free to do that. Any questions as of Dove at this time?
I have a question. You might have
Yeah.
just answered this. I literally stepped out for a second. When I go through TSA and I like opt out of the facial recognition stuff, they usually ask for another form of ID. Do I have to give that, or is it just like with my regular like passport?
Yeah, I know that they ask for another form of identity verification. Um, I don't know. I don't know what the response, but I think the way they can do it is by, because now they you put your ID in this machine, um, and then they like take the picture or something, or they'll probably, I think what I've been seeing is that if you refuse to go through biometrics, then they have to like hold you up, inspect your ID, look at your path, your whatchamacallit, your boarding pass, and then see if they correspond, like you're not bullshitting. But I don't think they can ask for another form of ID, because how can you be expected to have another form of ID? Like if you're traveling domestically, you need a real ID, like that's all you need, but you don't need a passport too. Most people don't have like a tribal ID, right? Like a school ID isn't really legitimate. A work ID is probably not useful. So no, I don't think they can. I think that might be a way of like holding you up, but you have every right to only have one form of ID. In fact, in general, you don't have to have an ID, but if you're going through security, you do. That is the rule. You need a form of ID, a legal form, a real ID now, or a passport. But again, like I think it's about like, if they ask you that, right, like you can either choose to say like, hey, like you don't actually need that, or you're like, well, I do have another form of ID, here's my tribal ID, right? Like it's on you. Again, their job, they're just kind of like, yeah, they're just like the enforcers, but they don't really have that much power. And if you're respectful with it, they'll probably just accept that you only have one form of ID. But if you have a second one, it doesn't hurt to share it, because ultimately, like, do you really want to be held up another hour? Like it's probably better to give the second form of ID and still avoid the biometrics than to say, well, I have a second form of ID, but I don't want to give it to you, because then it's like, well, why not? So, and the other way maybe to make you sleep at night is like, they already know all this shit about us, or a lot of shit about us, and it's super reasonable to like not want your photo taken by that sketchy scanner thing. But like the TSA agent that's looking at your two forms of ID is probably not, doesn't have much power to like do much to you after the fact. So
Cool. One more quick question. I'm traveling with my kids for the first time ever this week, and all I have is their birth certificate. Um, I've never gone like, are their faces gonna get scanned? I don't know how that works for like kids. I don't know if you know the answers. It's fine.
no, you don't, kids under 18 do not need to show ID for domestic flights. So if they're traveling with you, they do need to show ID if they're flying internationally for sure. Um, how are your kids under 2?
They're three twins.
3. So yeah, there is a rule, I'm pretty sure, that if your child is under 2, that they might, uh, you know, at least the airline at the gate might ask for proof of age, because some people use like, they say they're under 2, so they sit on your lap. But if they're older than 3 or older than 2, I think they need their own seat. But at the gate or at security, no, they don't need their own ID. As long as you're with them, they don't need to have their photos taken. And you have a right to say, I don't consent. Like you don't, your kids don't have to consent and you don't have to consent. Yeah. But I think it is good to travel with a form of ID for children, because you never know. Like if it isn't the TSA, like what if you run into trouble wherever you're going and you need something to identify your child? Like sometimes it is smart to travel with a social security card or a birth certificate for sure. But I still don't think you're not obligated to present that at TSA for your child if they're under 18. Yes.
Thank you, Lala. Anyone else? Any last words, Stove, before we hop off? Close us out.
Yeah, I think I've said it already, but it's like we can't trust these officers of the quote unquote law to care about our bodies and our health and our safety. Clearly they're opposed to all those things. And I think what ends up, it's like we have to be the bigger person. Like we have to be the one to seek de-escalation. I think we have to be the one to create the context that minimizes pain and injury to ourselves. And I think sometimes it is about choosing when you comply and choosing when you resist. Like I think if you to resist successfully involves some compliance, because like yeah, I'm an attorney and I want to just go burn down all the federal courthouses in this country, but like how is that going to help me? How is it going to help my relatives? How is it going to help Native people? You know, if tens of thousands of us got together or more or something and had a plan, maybe, but like one person, like it's like think about Luigi, like God save Luigi, like whatever, like we need, like he's a revolutionary in a lot of ways, right? But he's probably going to be executed or spend the rest of his life in prison for doing something that all of us agreed with for the most part. And that's powerful. But I think when you're going through security, you're not, yeah, free our boy Luigi. But when you're going through security, like it's not like, I think almost demoralizing it, like meaning like strip the interaction of moral unrest. Like yesterday I went to security in Albany, New York, and I always get pissed when they like take my bag to the side and try to inspect it. I'm like, well, why the hell do you got to do that? Like you're just gonna stress me out. I got to repack everything. You're gonna put your dirty hands in there, whatever. But I at first wanted to get really obnoxious, like with the TSA guy, but then I realized like this guy isn't, like he's just here doing his job, like, and he was the higher up, and it was like the lower staff, the newer staff that had taken my bag to the side. And so he ended up searching my bag and he saw it was just a ball. Like I have like a massage ball in my bag. And so he reached into, he's like, oh yeah, the lower staff, they don't know yet that a ball often screens on their system for, it's like it looks like something. I don't know what it is. But he was like, this happens a lot. People bring a baseball, they bring a tennis ball, and for some reason it ticks off the device. So I almost chose a path of like argumentation with this guy, but I waited. I said I was going to wait till he said something to me and see what his tone was. But his tone was like kind. He was like, "Oh man, I'm sorry about that. Sorry for the delay. You know, this happens a lot. You know, tennis balls or whatever get screened and they pop up." So I almost made the situation worse. I almost, if I had said something before he started talking to me, I likely would have stood there for another 15 minutes. I probably would have been pat down. I probably would have had my whole bag emptied. But I think it was a moment for me where I realized, like, all right, you're already through security. They're just checking your bag. You know, you have nothing to hide. Like, just wait till they approach you and communicate with you before you set the tone. And I think if you let them set the tone and it's a positive tone, then there's no harm in responding positively. But if they set the tone negatively, then I don't think we're obligated to play nice. I think then we're like, you're an equal citizen, you're an equal person in that context. So I think it's about being careful when you choose to resist, when you choose to oppose. And yeah, I think if we want to have a long-term strategy of resistance and opposition, we need to pick our battles. I think that's kind of the biggest lesson, is like choosing when we put our lives on the line, when we put our mental health on the line, we put our friends and family on the line. And especially if you're traveling with kids or with an elder or with a parent, like, you don't want to be in a position where now you might be held back and now your family member is going to be in a worse off position because of that. So I think that's the biggest thing, is like choosing your battles. And yeah, it's a little different when ICE agents come to your door, then the battle's already been chosen. But if you're going through security at the airport, you want to get out of there as soon as you can. So I think it's like, you don't got to say more than you need to. You don't, I think being silent, I think that puts these agents in their head, because they know that no one really likes them. So if you're just kind of silent with them, they just kind of, they realize, oh, I don't want to piss this person off. But if you start pissing them off, then they, it's like a feedback loop. So I think that's the biggest lesson for me, is like, choose your moments to challenge, and choose your moments to stay silent and keep your peace. Keep your peace a little bit.
Thank you, Doe. Appreciate it. Thanks y'all for coming. Thank you for your patience. Appreciate appreciate y'all so much for being here. And yeah, you know where Dove is at.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Lala, for your question.
Thank y'all. Have a good day.
Thank you, Anna.
Stop the recording.
Oh, yeah.
Bye.